For nearly 2 decades, PlayStation fans have been told the same thing. Jak and Daxter is dead, Naughty Dog moved on, the industry shifted, and one of gaming's greatest duos was left to rot in the IP graveyard. But behind the scenes, I believe something is starting to shift. From high-level executive statements to massive leaked pitches, the pieces are starting to line up for a revival. Now, to be completely transparent, I still think the chances of this happening are in the single digits, but as someone who loves classic PlayStation, my copium has never been higher, and I think that there's just too much smoke right now to ignore that something is happening. To understand where Jak is going, we have to have a look at why he left. The biggest misconception in the community is that Naughty Dog simply stopped caring about the franchise. But the problem wasn't a lack of interest, it was direction. Naughty Dog was changing as a studio. The mature, grounded stories they wanted to tell no longer fit neatly into the colorful, stylized world of Jak and Daxter. Eventually, those early concepts for realistic Jak 4 evolved into completely different projects that ultimately became Uncharted and The Last of Us. And it's not like Naughty Dog has completely forgotten their roots. They still put Easter eggs into every major release to respect that legacy. Yes, you can find Jak and Daxter Easter eggs in Uncharted and The Last of Us games. But the former co-president Evan Wells at the time admitted that seeing Ratchet and Clank continue to succeed actually made him wish that Naughty Dog had a new Jak game in development. He also revealed that he'd seen fans running online campaigns for years begging for a return. Despite nearly 2 decades of silence, the demand had never disappeared. People still care, and PlayStation knows it. But let's be realistic, Naughty Dog is never going to make this game. The original developers who built the trilogy are almost entirely gone from the company. The modern studio represents a completely different era of game design, and honestly, I wouldn't want them forced into making a mascot platformer that I don't think that they're really equipped for anymore. If Jak comes back, I think it needs to be handled by a developer that is genuinely passionate about the golden era of 3D platformers. And that brings us to one of the most baffling parts of this entire story, Sanzaru Games. In March of 2026, it was revealed that a former senior animator at Sanzaru Games had actually pitched a full Jak and Daxter remake/remaster to Sony. While the pitch was ultimately rejected, the rejection itself isn't the most important part. The crucial takeaway is that the industry professionals, the people that are actually making these games, still see the immense potential in this franchise. And it seriously breaks my heart to see that Sony is funding live service slop and all of these unneeded remasters over these beloved foundational IPs that they're just leaving to rot. But this is where things start to get really interesting, because this isn't just about Jak anymore. It's about PlayStation's entire corporate strategy. For years, Sony has been fiercely hyper-focused on massive, hyper-realistic cinematic blockbusters. Spider-Man, God of War, Horizon, The Last of Us. But recently, the messaging out of PlayStation's leadership has completely changed. Whilst they still want these blockbuster games, PlayStation boss Herman Holst explicitly confirmed that Sony is actively exploring opportunities to leverage its legacy IPs and dormant classic brands. Shortly after this, multiple industry insiders also added fuel to the fire. Reporter Andy Robinson noted that Sony was working on revivals of older franchises, and trusted insider Nate the Hate also said that there was truth to these real reports that Sony is exploring its unused IP library. Now, to be completely clear, none of these reports specifically name drop Jak, but that's missing the point. The point is that for the first time in an entire console generation, PlayStation appears invested in looking backwards instead of only looking forwards. And that is exactly the corporate environment a franchise like Jak and Daxter needs to get greenlit. But if you want to look at the absolute strongest corporate argument for why I think Jak could return, you have to look at Sony's biggest obsession right now, Hollywood. I know this sounds crazy, but stick with me. Through PlayStation Productions, Sony is actively desperate to turn their gaming catalogs, just like Nintendo, into massive movies and television shows. We've seen it with The Last of Us, Twisted Metal, Uncharted, even the new God of War TV series that's being directed by Amazon. And guess who is finally in the crosshairs? A few years back, the Uncharted director Ruben Fleischer dropped a massive bombshell, revealing that he was officially working on a Jak and Daxter movie adaptation for Sony. Shortly after, the Spider-Man actor himself, Tom Holland, went on record stating that his dream project would be to work on a bizarre, dark, live-action Jak and Daxter film. Now, why does a movie matter for a franchise that has had no games in years? Sony's current corporate playbook isn't just about selling video games anymore. It's about creating multimedia events. Look at how they revitalized Twisted Metal with a television show, or how a single HBO series pushed The Last of Us back to the top of the sales charts. If PlayStation Productions actually pushes this film adaptation through development, Sony isn't going to let that theatrical release happen in a vacuum. They will want a modern game, a remake, or even a high-effort remaster sitting on the shelves ready to capture that new audience. The silver screen might just be the ultimate Trojan horse to get Jak back on our consoles. And if you think reviving a dead platformer after decades sounds way too unrealistic, just look at the competition right now. For years, fans assumed that Spyro the Dragon was completely done. Aside from the remakes, he was not going to get a new game. But after nearly 20 years, Spyro is returning with a brand new installment, stealing the spotlight as arguably the most well-received trailer of the mid-year showcase events. What does that prove? It proves that mascot platformers don't have an expiration date. A franchise can disappear for 15 or 20 years and the audience will still be right there waiting. If Spyro can do it, why can't Jak, or Sly Cooper, or even Infamous? We even have validation from the very top. A former PlayStation boss, Sean Layden, was also recently asked which classic franchise he would immediately revive if given the chance. His answer was instantaneous: Jak and Daxter. Remember, Layden is the exact executive who fought tooth and nail internally to greenlight the 2016 Ratchet & Clank reboot, when others inside of Sony insisted that nobody wanted a cartoon platformer on modern markets anymore. But let's be real, among Ratchet & Clank fans, the 2016 reboot was incredibly divisive. Its story was heavily sanitized to tie into the movie, and it stripped away a lot of the edge that made the original PS2 game so special. But looking at it objectively, from a business standpoint, it completely crushed expectations, pulling in over 7 million sales to become the single best-selling game in that entire franchise. Layden was proven completely right. The internal passion for Jak exists at the highest levels, and the fan demand matches it perfectly. In May of 2026, a community poll on Push Square asked thousands of PlayStation fans which legacy franchise they wanted back the most. The winner? Jak and Daxter, taking the #1 spot ahead of Sly, Resistance, and then Killzone. Sony hasn't forgotten the duo either. We have had a Jak and Daxter game ported or a spin-off on almost every single PlayStation generation since the PS2. They know that this IP has value. So, when we look at all of the evidence, what is the verdict? I don't think that Jak 4 is secretly in development right now. I don't think that a surprise reveal trailer is dropping tomorrow, but I also absolutely refuse to believe that the franchise is dead. The original developers still talk about it. Studios are actively pitching remakes. Forum executives are publicly championing it. Sony leadership is openly looking to dig into their back catalog, and the market is proving that classic platformers are highly profitable again. For the first time in a very, very long time, I think the stars are actually starting to align here. So the question isn't whether the world wants Jak and Daxter back. The question is whether PlayStation is finally ready to realize it's worth the investment. And honestly, I think there is more reason to hope today than there has been in the past 20 years. But I want to hear from you. Will PlayStation ever actually pull the trigger on a revival? Or is this where the precursor legacy ends? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.